Well, hi everybody, and welcome from Washington, the Seattle area. Um, so it seems like I read in the newspaper that Oregon is lifting the emergency for the state April 1st, and Washington still hasn't made a decision. Is that normal? Oregon ahead of Washington? It I married a girl from Oregon, so I feel like I'm like it's my second favorite state, and it's I always wonder this question: what's it like if you live in Oregon when you meet somebody from Washington? And so, don't answer that, but um, I've always wondered that. So, anyways, hey, first time I've ever done this like this, and so if you could kind of like I don't know, nod your head or wave or something, and I'll feel like we're here, we're good. So we just roll. Should we should just do that? Here's what I was talking to a pastor yesterday, and he was a little discouraged. Anybody met a discouraged pastor recently? And I uh, I said to him, if you're still in ministry and if you're married, your spouse still likes you, and if you have kids, they still want to talk to you, and you have at least one friend, you're winning. Yeah. I mean, think about this. In this last year, we all have challenge and support, right? Um, I think ministry is already challenging, but did your challenge go up or down in the last 2 years? Did challenge go up or down? Went up. Yeah. For most of us, did your support network the last 2 years go up or down? And for some people, I think that the support levels, just because of the way the mandates were and isolation, their challenge went up, their support went down, which of course is impacting on us. And so one of the things we're just focusing on is how do we bring our support up? So when I look at a room filled with pastors in Oregon gathered together, you made a great decision today. And if you just feel supported coming out of this today, and you get one idea, I think it was totally worth it. Don't you agree? So here's what I want to start with today. So I want to talk about something that is a little bit there's some tension to it, okay? And I'm not in the room, so I'm just looking at your faces and trying to guess what the body language is like. But there's some tension to the subject I want to bring up, and it starts with a series of questions. Okay, so I want to bring up three questions, and you guys, if you would answer them like out loud, would be great on whatever you think. But I asked this in the state of Washington. I want to see what's like. Are in the state of Oregon, are people moving to Oregon or moving away? Okay. How about the city of Portland? Are people moving to Portland or moving away? Okay. Um, how about the state of Washington? I don't know if how much we're just right next door. Are people moving to Washington or moving away? So I went and looked at this because it just, am I the only one that felt like a bunch of people moved out of their church? Raise your hand if you had some people move, right? And so I was looking at that, and every place I go where I'm talking to a group of Christians in on the West Coast specifically, when you ask that question, are people moving towards or moving away? They tend to say away. So I went and looked up some of the data, and of course, when you look at data, you're just like there, in between census. I get that some of the data is a little bit of an estimate, but this is our best understanding of where our states are at. And I understand when you look at population, you have birth rate and death rate and so forth. But did you know that the state of Oregon last year grew by 35,000 people? Portland grew by just under 4,000 people last year. The state of Washington last year grew 91,000 people. But when you talk to a Christian in Washington and you ask them, are people moving here or moving away? They're going to say moving away. And here's why: because their Christian friends are moving away. We all at least know one person from Seattle that moved away, right? He used to be the quarterback for the Seahawks. And so there's this tension in Washington, and I wonder if it's in Oregon too, where there's Christians that are moving away to go places where it feels like there's people who share my values. I want to be where people also maybe think the way I do or vote the way I do or see. And so, but I want you to think about this. Is it possible that Christians right now, because the last 2 years, are feeling this pull to move away from non-Christians? Are there non-Christians in Oregon? We got a few of them in Washington. I don't, you've picked up on that. What is the impact if all of the Christians want to move away from the non-Christians? Isn't it like the opposite of what Jesus did? Like, didn't I mean, can you imagine the conversation in heaven where the Father is like, look, um, Earth needs you, you know? There's trouble, there's problems, there's evil. And so you're gonna need to go to Earth. And Jesus is like, I'm not going. Have you seen those people? I'm not doing it. And he's like, no, you have to do it, Father. And he's like, well, I tell you what, I'm not gonna wear a mask. He's like, well, you don't have to wear a mask, but you will be crucified. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. I mean, what's that conversation like? I mean, what is the impact of Christians trying to get away from the non-Christians? And I'm telling you, like, we're a church that was launched 22 years ago, and like the whole thing was that it wasn't my idea, it was to start a church for people who weren't going to church. And so we want to get every Christian on the mission and we're in with their families and their workplaces. And this is with the last 2 years have been hard, even for like our best people. I think there needs to be some empathy of how hard it's been. And but at the but underneath all of that, we have to ask, so what do we believe about the gospel? Does the gospel win wherever it goes? Are we sent by God where we live? Is God just trying to get all the Christians together in states that where they're just like, let's just get all the Christians together? Aren't you glad? I think you live in a state and I live in a state where there's a lot of non-Christians. And I think God is placed us here on purpose at this time. And I actually believe this. If we ask God and we say, what do we need to rethink right now? And we can rethink. I've got three things I want us to rethink, but none of it makes sense unless we get one thing right. And the biggest thing I think we have to rethink comes from Matthew chapter 9. Okay. So Matthew chapter 9, Jesus comes here, launches his mission. He's going through the towns and the villages, stopping in the synagogues. He's announcing the gospel. He's preaching the good news. Hey, heaven's coming back here. The rule of God is coming back on earth as in heaven. And he's announcing the kingdom of God. It's right here. It's right in front of our face. Like, I don't see it. He says, right here. Repent and believe the kingdom of heaven is near. And people are being healed. People are being set free. By the way, and I don't know if you have this in Oregon, we have it in Washington. There's two camps. I always like to think that C.S. Lewis said it, the devil sends his lies out in pairs to opposite extremes. You have one camp over here that says, we need to do social gospel. And if you don't do social gospel, you don't love Jesus and it all needs to be social. Then you have this other side that says, hey, we got to get back to just preaching the gospel. We just preach the gospel and we don't mess with that stuff over there. And I think we see Jesus, these are married. Good deeds builds goodwill that leads to the good news. These are all, it's all connected. My relationship up and out. So Jesus is announcing the gospel. He's not just sharing good news, but he's actually bringing good news to the people socially. And he sees that he says they're like sheep without a shepherd. They're confused and helpless. Right now, how many Christians do we have disconnected from churches? How many Christians do we have that honestly, they are sheep without a shepherd? And we need it. Now, here's something I think that's, I'll come back to that. So we have sheep without a shepherd. And then the next line, Jesus says this. He turns to his disciples and he says, and this is what we got to rethink. This is the one thing we've got to get right. He says that the harvest is what? Great. And the workers are few. I think if you're like me and you can start to like, did your congregations get bigger or smaller the last 2 years? Mine got smaller. Right? Isn't it easy to start to think that the harvest is actually few? He actually said, no, the harvest is great. You get like, we live in states where the harvest is great. And if we don't think that, think about the impact of not believing that what Jesus, like, is Jesus wrong? The harvest is great. It's the workers that are few. So when we talk about rethinking our ministries, rethinking our churches, it has to be around this, that Jesus thinks the harvest is great and the workers are few. And so then he says, so pray to the Lord of the harvest. This is something that God's got to put on the hearts of his people to be workers in his kingdom, in his harvest field. And so, regardless of the size of church or the size of city or what, the harvest is great. The workers are few. We're praying to the Lord of the harvest to send more workers. Have you guys ever seen the concentric circles? I think Rick Warren wrote about them, and other people have, and it kind of starts with, if you were to draw a circle, you have the core, right? And then you have the congregations a little bit bigger, then the crowd's a little bigger, and then your biggest circle is the community you live in, right? So you have core, congregation, crowd, community. It seems like before COVID, most of my time, and maybe most of yours, was focused on how do I get people from the crowd to the congregation, right? And we got these events, we got these outreaches. We get people from the, how do we get them from the crowd to the congregation? I think that our jobs changed. And our new job is to get people who are in the core fired up to be workers in God's kingdom and get them out in the community doing kingdom work. That's our new job. And so the three things I want to talk to you about that I think we have to rethink, that I'm rethinking, I'm asking our church to rethink it, and is all based on that. We think that Jesus was right when he said the harvest is great, the workers are few, and we're praying for more workers. We are just, a whole thing right now, we are focused on our core. We are focused on our core and getting them fired up, ignited, equipped, resourced, and then sent and connected out in the community. That is the number one thing we got to do right now. So three shifts I think we have to rethink. If you're taking notes, and I want Lee to be really proud of me. So I connected this to your rethink. So these are three things that we're rethinking. Okay, is everyone still with me? In the back, you waved your hands. Thank you. That gave me a lot of encouragement. um, okay, the first thing I think we have to rethink is we have to rethink our job as pastors. Um, would you agree that that America suffers a little bit from a celebrity culture? Do you agree that some of that's gotten into the church? Is there been a bit of a celebrity culture with pastors? And then what's the impact of that? Is that healthy for our churches and communities? I don't think so. Is it healthy for our families and our kids? I know my kids are like, please, no, thank you. I do not want that weight on me. We're not celebrities, we're servants, right? Well, the shift I think has been, there's a focus on the pastor having, in some ways, let's just call it two tiers of calling in our churches. The pastors are really called by God. We're the capital M ministers. And then there's this other tier, and in the old school they call it laity. And these are your lowercase m ministers, and they're the people in our churches, and they're not as called as we are. And I think we have to rethink that. I think that we have to rethink that our people, our core, they are as called as we are. I asked our church last week, I said, are you as called as me? And they paused. And I'm like, oh no, because the word church means what? called out ones. Like you get like, that's a big thing. If our people don't think they're called, then what are they going to be doing during the week? I'm telling you, we have more people on our team than we realize. We just got to get, we got to get them thinking they're a worker in God's kingdom. So the shift is from the pastor being this one person, and then okay, to actually where the pastor is in I when I read Ephesians 4, and of course the word pastor is shepherd, right? And every one of this I'm looking at, you're a shepherd. But we're also, don't we have a church filled with shepherds? Don't we want the moms and dads in our church to be shepherds to their kids? Don't we want the business owners to feel like a shepherd to their workplaces? Don't we want the coaches and the teachers? My wife's a third grade school teacher. She's the best shepherd. She's got a bunch of little sheep. And so think about this. Go back to Israel. Okay, there was Israel in Exodus 19. God tells Moses, he shouts to him from the mountain. He's at the foot of Sinai. He tells him, these people are my chosen, they're my special people, they have a special calling, and they're to be a kingdom of priests, the whole nation. And it's interesting because you have a tribe, the Levi, that's the priestly tribe. But unfortunately, some people thought that means that they're priests and we're not, which is interesting because when Peter goes to write his letter to the church in 1 Peter 2:9, doesn't he seem like maybe we got that wrong? Because he says, don't you know, we are a what? We're a holy nation, right? We are a chosen people. We are a royal priesthood. So Israel was never designed to be a nation with priests, but a nation of priests for the world. Now, carry that over to the church. Are we supposed to be a church with a couple pastors that are tired, burnt out, and a little bit crabby? Or are we a church of pastors for the community? And if we rethink that, how does that change what Jesus said when he said that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are, we're adding workers to the mission field? You guys see that? Your people, my people, they don't believe it. They don't, I mean, are you called? The pastor's called. I don't know if I'm called. Are you a pastor to your community, to your workplace? And how would that change how they pray if they believe that? How would that change their involvement? What would Monday look like? How many Christians right now are at work and they're looking forward to Friday, not Monday, and they hate their jobs, and somehow we're believing God's going to do a revival in our community? We got to raise up pastors, send them out as workers into their homes, into their schools. Okay. Second thing, yes, you're still with me. I can see this. I like this. Okay. Number 2, I think we have to rethink our purpose of Sundays. Okay. So we rethink our job. Okay. I'm a pastor. I'm a shepherd, but I'm actually apprenticing more shepherds. I'm raising up a church of shepherds for the whole community. We got pastors for everybody. And then secondly, we're also rethinking Sundays. What is our reason for gathering? Okay. Now, if you're to go back before COVID, I think most churches in America, if you look at their budget, spent 80% of their budget on Sunday and 20% of their budget the rest of the week. Now, what would happen if that flipped? Okay. Now you have to understand. I mean, I said that to our elders here, which is like, they're like, well, before you do anything crazy, let's talk some more. But think about that. Okay, now, okay, I know I'm not alone. We got disconnected Christians. We have a lot of Christians that have lost sight of what Sunday's about. Right? Anybody here know, like, you bumped into somebody, and they say they go to your church, and you're like, but do you? Like, I mean, because right, I mean, there was at least 6 months during COVID. I didn't know if my family came. Right? Where anybody do Zoom church, or you do, you're online. I had to make breakfast just to kind of somehow beg my family to come downstairs to watch the gathering, So it's tough. I get it. And so Yeah, but if we've got our all of the Christians in our churches feeling called by Jesus, that's by the way what the word church means, is called out once, and they're sent as workers where they live, work, and play. I'm going to come back to that. Okay. Live, work, and play. They're sent as workers. They're sent as pastors, lowercase p pastors. I'm not talking about the title. I'm talking about the gift. I'm talking about being a shepherd. Okay. That heart. So they're called leaders, leaders in our community. By the way, a shepherd's a leader. So, okay. So now they're heading out. Monday through Saturday is mission. Sunday is worship and celebration. Sunday makes more sense because what are they doing? They're celebrating what God did on the mission all week, and they're getting refueled. And every Sunday, we're launching them into the mission field. Now, the early church, because you have people say, well, I just, especially with online, they're like, well, I just have my own relationship with Jesus. And I'm like, I don't think Jesus thinks that. He said, I'm the vine and you're the branches, and that's plural. You ever seen a vine with one branch hanging off of it? That looks weird. So you're going to get to heaven to have your own personal room, so okay, so we're a part of a body and part of a church, but some people they've forgotten what it means to be part of a church. So we just got to start again and teach them. Let's just teach them again. Hey, you're here all week. You're called Monday through Saturday in the mission. You're a leader, you're a pastor, you're a shepherd to all the places where you live, work, and play. And then on Sunday, we're going to celebrate what God's doing, and we're going to fill you up and launch you out. And so that way they're saying, okay, so the early church, often in the Greco-Roman world, there was called the symposiums where they would gather and they would actually have a meal, entertainment, and honestly, a lot of sexual immorality went on. So like literally they had their own version of Las Vegas. The early church, in a lot of ways, because Sabbath would be over on Saturday, let's say 6 o'clock, they would have a meal Saturday evening, and then they would just play games. And I say play games, but they would be involved in each other's lives, talk, fellowship. That's Saturday. Sunday, that was a work day, right? So the early church had gathered. All the stuff I'm reading right now, I went back to school to get my doctorate. I'm trying to, I had to keep active. All of they would go to, so Sunday mornings, before they went to work, they gathered. The gatherings were short because people were going to work. They weren't long, they were short. The average pastor preached 6 to 15 minutes. Some people in our church were like going, oh, if revival would come that way, I'm in. And there'd be a few readings. People would be sitting in rows. They hear sermon, and then they're launched into their work week. We've got to get Sunday back to where we're launching people out into the mission field, out into do kingdom work. And then the last thing is this. The third thing to rethink is, so 1, role of pastors. 2, reason for gatherings. 3, we need to rethink our buildings. And we need to rethink where ministry happens. Now, okay, the word church nowhere in the Bible refers to a building. God's presence was in the garden. So if you want to, that's the first gather, if you want to think about a church worship gathering, think of the Garden of Eden. His presence is there. You had work and worship together. And then you have the tabernacle, and you have God's presence at the center and moving. And when they moved, he was out in front. Talk about a shepherd. The temple was a moment where, David wanted to build it, Solomon did, and we're just going to be right here. And God's glory filled it, but his glory was too big for it, wasn't it? And even Paul said, God wasn't looking to live in a house or a temple made by human hands, right? And, so Jesus comes in tabernacles. He dwells. So you have the presence of God again coming. And the church is together. We're that temple, that tabernacle, that Spirit of God moving through us. And so what we see with Jesus was doing outside of the temple things that people thought could only be done in the temple. Ministry has to leave the building. Now, I'm not anti-buildings. My family lives in one. We bought it 20 years ago at home. I love buildings. We right now as a church, so we had a lot of bad news during COVID. We didn't have more people, we had less. We didn't have more giving, we had less, but we had less expense. And right now, there's opportunities where I live that never existed before for facilities. So we're right now in the midst of closing on 3 different properties. So there's opportunities. We gotta be aware of that. So I'm not anti-building. I don't want you to hear that. We have, I'm in a building. Um, but the whole concept that the church building is the place where ministry happens, that's not true. Um, ministry, ministry, we gotta get people thinking every sector of society is a place where God's glory can fill. My wife's a third grade school teacher, right? And those third graders are going to be tested on their national reading exams. And 6 years ago, we started listening to third graders read. I had one of them was here Sunday, by the way, and she's in ninth grade now. And I had her for a year. I listened to every year. I'd listen to 4 kids read who are below reading level, and my whole goal is to get them to reading level before the national exam. They baseline the kids when they come in. They project them where they think they're going to be at the end of the year, and just the kids in third grade in our school district, they outperformed their projections on average by 76% because a member from the church came and listened to them read. We did the program through the school, through the school district. They're volunteering, did not put our name on it. We can do this in every sector of society. We just held here at this training center a leadership lunch for all the business leaders in our church. We had 125 come out to the last leadership lunch, free lunch. We have people in the church making. There's a business person that has said, "Look, I will just do it for as a mission." And the room's filling up with business people, and we're bringing in people who are going to bring good business practices and values, but we're also building a space where people can connect. Well, outside of this space, people are starting to think, okay, maybe I'm called to my business. My daughter, I thought she'd marry a pastor, right? I don't know if that's good or bad. She married a guy that he was in my first small group in youth. And then they started dating. He said, "Hey, will you mentor me?" And I was like, "No way, because you guys are going to break up, and we don't have to both break up, do we?" So they dated and broke up, and I said, "See, we're fine." But 2 years later, they got back together, and that's when I knew, okay, now I need to mentor because they're going to get married. And sure enough, they got married. And I think he went through a season where he thought, well, I feel a call to ministry, but he also felt a call to launch a business. He's 25 now. He's got 19 employees. And his business is, I mean, this year, for the first year, his overall money in was over $1 million. And he's meeting people that he would never meet unless he was doing business. And I'm wondering this. Here's some things I'm wondering. It seems like every young person I know has a side hustle. Is this God's way of getting the mission moving again, like he did with the Apostle Paul doing tent making? Like the side hustles are helping all of us meet more people in the community outside the building. I'm also noticed this is there's a lot of co-vocational pastors. I might be looking at some right here. Is this actually a benefit, a blessing, not a curse? Like, what if all of us started to find ways where, you know, I the last 15 years I've been coaching basketball at the high school in the area because I'm not good at a lot of stuff, but that's something I could do. How do we get out there and show our people ministry happens outside the building? I'll end with this is I had a dad that worked at a grocery store. And some of you guys have heard my story. My last name is Davis. Because of it, a lot of people thought I was actually Denny Davis's son. I was actually Donald Davis's son. A little different. My dad worked at Lucky Stores. One of the things that I saw with my dad is my dad was somebody that the community, you would go to this grocery store and shop there just to see my dad. And when people say, how did you learn people skills? I was like, from my dad. He taught me to not point when someone asks where the ketchup was, you walk with them because you get to know their story. I watched my dad become somebody that people in the store would come to our house with their problems. One guy handed my dad a gun because he didn't want to, he said, I might do something bad tonight because my wife just left me. I watched him pray with people. I watched him our family would go to church with people. And I just thought that was normal. He felt called to his workplace. And this is something when we talk about rethinking, if we can get everyone in our churches feeling called, being sent from our gatherings, and thinking ministry happens where they live, work, and play, we're going to see, I believe, a fifth great awakening in America. You know, Nehemiah is a story where he gets all the people of God there to work on these walls that are broken. We got some broken walls, don't we? And he gets everybody working, and they do in 52 days what was not done in 141 years. If what would happen if every Christian got on the mission? Every Christian felt called to their neighborhoods, to their schools, what if just the Christians decided we're not going to try to get away from the non-Christians, we're going to actually try to love them? Why are we trying to get away from the people that Jesus left heaven to come to be with? And so there is statistics say 2.5 billion Christians in the world. Can you imagine what could be done? I bet you in 52 days we could. What would happen in America? What would happen in Jesus is speaking to us saying the harvest is great, the workers are few. So here's what something I did, and I'll share it. There's a couple things we did the last 2 years, and the things that we did with them is we actually scrubbed our name off of them. Seems like the first 20 years, I really wanted people to know that our church made this. And in the last 2 years, is like, nobody cares. And so we white labeled this so that anyone can use it. You can put your name on it. You can make it better. Okay. But we made a little book that's called Love Where You Live. And you open it up, and the Love Where You Live book allows people to see how Jesus modeled being on the mission where you live, work, and play. Live your neighborhood and your community. We're not sitting in buildings hoping people show up. Secondly, where you work, the workplace or school, your schools. These are all places where God's at work. Play. We live in Washington and Oregon in some of the most beautiful places in the world. Do we want people to go outside? Do we want them on mountains and on lakes? And yeah, what if they thought that their hobbies and interests were actually connected to God's mission? So the book takes them through this process to where we actually wrote up what we call a missional Mad Lib. Have you done Mad Libs before? And you write into the Mad Lib the answers to your questions, to the question asked, and then you plug it in, and you get to read it like a script, like what God's calling you to do. There's an older gentleman, he was reading, and he was talking about where God's called him, where he works, and then he looked up, he said, actually, I don't work, I'm retired, but there's still work. And so it takes you through that process, and it ends with a commitment. And that's how I wanted to end our time here before we had questions, is the commitment. This is what I'm asking everyone in our church. And then, by the way, I have church planters in Los Angeles. They said, Wes, it's the same here. Can we do this here? Absolutely. And the commitment says this. It says, I commit to not complain, sit on the sidelines, or wish I was somewhere else. Instead, I will pray, Jesus, may your kingdom come in, and then they fill it in. Their team, their school, their neighborhood, their city. May your kingdom come in Oregon, Portland, right? In Salem, Medford, right? Grants Pass. I almost said Grass Pamps. May your kingdom come as it is in heaven. What if every Christian made that commitment? I'm not going to complain, sit on the sidelines, or wish I was somewhere else. We're not trying to get away from the non-Christians. We're being sent by Jesus. So that was on my heart, Lee. And what to share is that those 3 shifts, rethinking our job as pastors, rethinking our reason for gatherings on Sundays, and then rethinking where ministry takes place and the purpose of our buildings. And so that's the kind of the rethink there. And I'm wide open for any questions that you have, and let's have a conversation. So who wants to go first?
You, Wes. I saw you at CMN also. I'm Kevin Reich. We've met before. I'm going to help facilitate some of the questions today. Anybody, if you want to, anybody have a question that you want to ask, if you just want to start coming up to the microphone here so we can facilitate that. I know it might take a little bit, so I'm going to prime the pump with a question. And so as you're thinking of your questions, go ahead and come. So real quickly, got it written down here just quick. Uh, so with these three rethink points that you gave us, Wes, what I love the simplicity, but I also love the depth of those of your other thoughts. What are some of the things that you're doing to teach your congregation these ideas, these concepts? There's passages of scripture, sermon series that you're preaching. What
Yeah,
would you do? What would you suggest to us as pastors to help implement some of these things in our congregations?
sure. Well, great question, Kevin. People need time and they need some structure to think through their calling. And so I often think I'm a communicator. So I'm like, I preached it. Like, what else? What else do you need? I just said it. So one is when we created the book is a resource. And I say a book, it's 20 pages and it's filling. So they can write in all these different. So people need a process. They need a little bit of structure. Okay. Okay. And they need some time. So what I do is I say, hey, here's something that's coming up. And then I say it, right? And then I think about you have three groups that you want to get on board before you do any kind of a sermon series. The first group is how do you get your elders, or your board and your whatever your senior leadership is. And if you're like, well, I'm in a church where it's like senior leadership is me and my spouse, okay, right? But get that first group on board. Then who's that next group that if you have any staff, you got to have that they're on board. But the most important group is the third. And I have a friend that just shared with me. He ran Gulfstream. He did Cessna, McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, and then he ended up at Gulfstream. So he said, I made millionaire planes for billionaires. He goes, and now I want the rest of my life turning. He's just, I want to take this and do something with this. And so we're sitting down. And he said, Wes, your frontline tires, if you think about a drag race, because you pastors, you're like right there at the steering wheel. The tires, the frontline tires, he said, that's not your elders, it's not even your staff. It's your core volunteers who don't get paid at the church. And that's the group that you got to get bought in on this. Because that's where traction. We got to take the energy and turn it into traction. And so you start to think in terms of, okay, that takes some time. So you're giving yourself a window. This is like a 3-month journey. Is we're going to let people know it's coming. Then we're going to say it. And then before we do it with everybody, we're going to do it with, I want to make sure I get that 1, 2, 3, those three groups. And the third group is my front line. And I tell them that, guys, you're our core volunteers. To me, this is the most important group in my heart to get this out. It's you. And so if that group doesn't feel called, doesn't feel like they're workers in the kingdom, doesn't feel like they don't know their neighbors, they don't know, they're not involved in the community. It doesn't matter what you preach. So then the final thing I would do is we would then say, we're going to do like a series called Love Where You Live. And Nehemiah would be an easy one because you can use the biblical teaching on Nehemiah of how you get people together, some of the obstacles they face, some of the challenges from the outside, from the inside. So, and really the rebuilding of the wall was just to rebuild their relationships and their worship. And so anyways, that would be some of the structure that I would want to bring to roll it out over time. My wife's a processor. And so if you told me I'm preaching tomorrow, I'd be like, sounds great. She needs a heads up. I have to say, look, in 3 weeks, I think I'm going to have you read something in our gathering. Are you okay with that? And she'll say, well, let me think about it and tell me the passage. So you have people who want to process. So let's give them time to process.
Great answer. So are you saying like a 3 to 6 month lead or 3 month lead in, and then 3 months after that to kind of communicate to the church?
Yes. And one of the beautiful things about COVID is what it did is, at least for us, and maybe it did for you guys, it changed our view of time. Right. And so, I mean, we were charging from thing to thing to thing. And then COVID happened. And we're like, like there was one point where I felt like, I think I'm making up jobs for people. And so what it's allowed us to do is we can actually go faster if we slow down.
Mm. Wow. Good concept. I don't see anybody lined up here. Come on, you got questions? Don't be afraid. Don't be shy. We've done live stream here for the last 2 years, so right. Rosa, come.
Hi, Wes. My name is Rosa Gonzalez. I work at Northwest University. We have an Oregon campus that's just outside of Salem. Our context at the university is a little bit different than obviously being in church ministry and interacting with the community in that way. In your opinion, what is the best way that our campus can support our state in these moves forward as we're rethinking the things that you've taught us today?
Yeah. So one of the things that's fun, Rosa, thank you. One of the things that I think God is hardwired into all of us areas where we already want to be involved or things we enjoy doing. So, so one of the things is to do it yourself is a way of role modeling for the other students or workers at the campus. But so for me, it was basketball, right? For my wife, her core passion in life is reading and musicals. Those are her two. So literacy is something that she dives into. And so anybody who cares about reading jumps in, and then she goes to musicals, but she takes people with her and she gets to know their stories. And then, she has other Christians that go with her and they have non-Christians that go, and then they talk. So she's found her place. I knew somebody else that their thing was the symphony. In fact, I knew a pastor's wife she loved the orchestra, but she said, I can't do it because the church schedule's too busy. Well, I mean, I think of all the people she would get to know if she was in the orchestra. So, yeah, it could be a sector of society. Like I'm in healthcare. I'm in the business world. I'm in government. I'm in military. Or it could be a hobby or interest. But if we can help people believe that God's placed them there and they can write it down, and then write down people like you would like a missionary, then that can start to get the wheels, get some traction going, and start to get to know people's stories and start to see this. Guess what? All of these people that we live around in our neighborhoods, at our workplaces, in our hobbies, God's already at work in their hearts. We're not starting it, we're joining him. He's already, the harvest is great. And if you're like me, it's hard to believe that's true, but it is. Does that make sense, Rosa?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and by the way, I will send to I will send out to Lee and to Kevin there the PDF of the book. Take it, put your name on it, make it yours, make it better, and have the students and workers do that. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wes. Great. Go ahead.
Hi, Wes. My name's Heather, and I live in Portland, Oregon. Just a quick question. What is your organizational structure? Because probably 50 years ago, there was nothing called a children's pastor, a youth pastor, and now roles even over COVID. Now, media arts pastor is the second most important pastor to the lead pastor. So, as we're rethinking church, can you give me an idea of some different roles and responsibilities that we're adding or maybe creating in order to make this new Rethink Church effective?
I, Heather, you just asked that was such a great question. I was kind of hoping that you would come over here and answer it. Uh, um, so so there's probably two ways to think about it, Heather. And so, can I give you a philosophical answer and then I'll get more practical? Philosophically, we were okay. If you go back 50 years, you could probably say we were a Christian nation. Okay, whatever that meant. Okay, but Christendom. I'm not saying bad or good, but like I just had a friend here from India, and I told him ahead of time. I'm like, you just have to know, American Christians feel persecuted. And he just was like, "You're kid," like he just cannot get his head around that. I'm like, no, I'm telling you, I'm warning you. We're at Chick-fil-A. First person that came and talked to him, absolutely, we're being okay. So he's like, wow, so American, yeah, they do feel that way. So there was a day where it kind of felt like everyone was either a Christian or you knew a Christian or you were raised Christian. Does that make sense? So your jobs in a church tended to be pastor, teacher, and then any kind of programming staff that started to follow when churches got bigger. Because remember, we went from neighborhood churches, which some of them, they're still there, right? But churches started to become like, not all, but some of them started to grow from neighborhood churches to teaching centers, teaching centers. And often they would move, if you were in a city, you would move out of the city to the suburbs where parking, and you could do more parking, and it was a little bit like land was a little bit cheaper. And I think we lost, as a church, I think we lost some influence in our metro cities. Does that sound like true? Like that's true? It's true in Seattle, I'll tell you that. I think it's true in Portland. I know it's true in Seattle, and it's true in a lot of metro areas. And by the way, our church planting plans right now work really well, except if you're in a city. Right? Right? I mean, I'm on the national team for this, so I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just like, I get it. Like what we're doing works as long as you don't live in a big city. And so we had neighborhood churches. They had pastors and teachers. And then when it grew larger and we decided to not, do more neighborhoods, you would start to add programming staff for the people of your church. So there's a mentality. So we hire a kids pastor to do kids ministry. Okay. So this is a shift. What if we staffed not for our church, but for our community, for our mission? And if you worked in kids, think about this. Your job in kids is probably what? To get the whole church involved in loving the kids of your community. Now, would you have to say, look, to do that well, we're going to need a core of families that are fired up and kids that know the Bible. I had a grandma that taught me 100 scriptures. So like I can quote them. I can do it. I love it. I believe in it. But do you understand is this is philosophical, Heather, but I would say this is, if you got away and did a brainstorm, draw up the sectors of society that make the most sense for you to get involved with now. I'm in Silverdale. We have 3 military bases. If we don't do something with the military, we're stupid. Okay. So you figure out for where you live, the sectors of society that make sense, and you start staffing based on a mission in those areas. So I get that that's a different approach, but remember I said, what if we shifted and instead of spending 80% on the weekends and 20% during the week, what if churches funded 80% towards the mission and 20% towards the Sunday, which still Sunday is like 14% of the week. So it's still pretty good. So that would be way up here. Okay. Okay. So as far as trends, okay. So let me say this, and this is going to get me off the hook with you, Heather. I have a mentor that told me when you're looking for systems, okay, so when churches start to get bigger and they decide maybe they don't want to multiply, they want to be a larger central area, or if they're multiplying, where they want to keep it together, and we call them campuses or whatever. One of the significant things you have to figure out are systems that scale. So he said, when you look for systems that scale, I look at larger churches. But he said, when I look for innovation, he goes, I don't go to the larger churches. They can't risk that. Because you look at the smaller churches for risk. You look for the smaller churches for innovation. And so my hope is this: is if you're in the room and you pastor a church that the number of people would put you in a category that'd be like a smaller church, maybe that's an incredible benefit and advantage now for you to innovate and do things that others can't. And what if you started to dream about staffing for the community, not staffing for your congregation? Remember, we're trying to get the core. So it used to be, how do I get the crowd to be a part of the congregation? Hey, the back 7 rows of every church is gone. How do we get the core to now be a part of the community? That's how I see it going. So you might actually have somebody that what they do is they're activating your church to be involved with the military, or you brought somebody on and what they're doing is activating people to be involved with the education in your community. It's a different way of thinking, but if we were missionaries in a country that was like India, which is 3% Christian, we might think this way. So that's my answer. Did I get myself off the hook? No, dang it.
No, you did. In fact, my husband is a missionary to skateboarders. And so every Friday night, we have 40 kids and we skateboard and tell them about Jesus. So that just validates, and it's exciting times. And so thank you for articulating it.
Heather, I heard some passion in your voice there. We need that. You and your husband with those 40 skateboarders, that's on the mission stuff. In fact, we need those stories in some of the churches that have been around for a while that have maybe they're considered large churches. They start to lose some of the passion. I mean, I get it. I mean, I've been here 22 years. You know, we work together and we hear those stories. So thank you.
That was a great question and a great answer. I just by show of hands, how many of that with that answer created some tension within you as a pastor? Right? I mean, as we think about that, that's what we've been talking about is we need to embrace the tension, and that's a great point that we need to walk away with. Another question. Another question. We have a few more minutes. Come. Yeah, go ahead. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Grant Parkey. I'm the campus pastor for Hope Church Canby. And we've been talking about, of course, building up people to understand their call in the mission field in their specific context, whether it's their business or school students or even the symphony, and calling them to be involved in ministries that are not necessarily a part of our church, which is awesome. But the challenge to that is we're also encouraging people to become involved in a ministry that's not a part of our church. And there are things still that we need volunteers to do. So how do you navigate the cultural tension where you need to build up a culture where people understand that ministry is not within the four walls of the church, that they need to serve in the context they've given them, which of course naturally takes away their time, their talent, and their resources, yet also still continuing to build a healthy serve culture in your local church where people are volunteering and just making sure that we have enough adults to run the kid ministry?
Yeah. Thank you, Grant. That's
Okay.
a great question. Yeah. So we want people involved in the community, but we still got to keep the doors got to stay open.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So how do we have both? So a couple thoughts here. It's probably harder in Oregon, and it's probably harder in Washington. When I've been traveling just a little bit, schools and speaking at different things. I was speaking in Montana during COVID, and I think I told them about it because I don't think they knew. Seriously, Montana, we ran out of toilet paper in Washington. They ran out of ammo. So, there's a little part of me as a pastor is like, why can't I be in Florida or Texas or the Midwest? And this love where you live was something that God had to do in my heart. So let's start with this. It's going to be harder. I think you've got to tell your people. So here's what you can't have at your church is people who do nothing. I mean, right. I mean, you're right. I mean, we're in the Northwest. We just don't have room for the people who do nothing. So, so I do want everyone to think in terms of this is the stuff you do here in the church as part of the family. We all have stuff that we do in our family. So I don't make it an either or. I probably make it a both and. But sometimes I have to think about their commitment level at the volunteering inside of the church, structure. Might have to have some little needs to be a little bit lighter than it used to be. So, for example, if they're going to be involved in a sector of society, if they're going to be involved somewhere outside in the community, I need to think in terms of this: do I have them serve 52 weeks? Probably not. They do 3 months and then they take the next. Like I had the same third grade Sunday school teacher my dad did. And it was because she did 9 months and had the summer off and she did it over 50 years. So I think part of our volunteer problem is we use people until they move on. And so create a system in which people can volunteer and help out. At my house, we have everybody come over for Sunday dinner. And when Sunday dinner is done, 2:00, we have Sunday dinner. Everybody knows we got jobs. My son-in-law helps me with the dishes, and my nephew takes out the trash, and my daughter and my oldest daughter, they're taking the food and putting it away. We all have to do something. So I think it's only if everyone does something, then nobody has to do everything. And in churches right now, what we've taught them the last 10 years, 20 years is a group can sit while the other group will just spend all their time doing it. So to me, it's a culture thing to start. It's not either or. We're all involved in the community and we're all going to do something. There's going to be breaks. We're going to make it something where it works with your life. But that's how I would attack it, starting with a culture thing, not just dividing it immediately.
Awesome.
Perfect. Great. Wes, thank you so much for joining us on Zoom today with this venue. What an opportunity. Thank you for inputting into our lives. How many appreciate what he had to say today. Yeah, yeah.